We're here with our third video in the Agent 3 live stream. And so we're going to talk about what Agent 3 is, what's new if you're unfamiliar. And then Raymar has some excellent content he'll share with us. Then we'll wrap up talking about some tips and tricks. So jumping right into it, we can get started with some introductions. So I'm Matt, lead developer relations at Replit. I'll kick it over to Francisco.
Yeah, hey everybody. That's Cruz Mendoza here, head of community here at Replit, and just supporting our users all over. And one of our incredible users here with us today. Pass it over to Raymar.
Yeah, hi, what's up, everyone? I am Raymmar, and I am a Replitaholic. I don't know. Is there like a term we're coining for people who are like kind of obsessed with the ability to build? I'm a no-coder from 2017 on, let's say 2012. I started learning WordPress. 2017, I learned Webflow and kind of like started really getting into automations and kind of building things, and like really fell in love with the idea of like building functional stuff, and kind of got trapped building static websites, and so when I found Replit and was started to play with like, building full stack software and fully functional things, I, just kind of been off the deep end. And the last 6 months, especially, I'd say even the last 2 months, my usage is through the roof. I'm multiple thousands of dollars in usage in Replit. And it's just wild. Every time like I like get a new feature or like pull something off or like just try to build something and it works, I'm like, holy cow. And so, I just keep being impressed with what I'm able to build. So anyway, I'm here to discuss whatever Replit related and probably some other things. So thanks for the invite and chance to share.
Yeah, outstanding. And I think a couple things there. First, we're going to go over. You're going to tell us your story, and I think there are a lot of really interesting things, interesting characteristics, and kind of like the background that you came from into kind of being an AI builder. And then second, like we can talk about usage and what's that's unlocked for you, because I think some people might hear, oh, thousands of dollars, that's a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, right? But it's more about, hey, what would you have had to pay a software developer, which is likely tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then would you have even accomplished that vision in the first place? So it's kind of both unlocking possibilities and then improving efficiency. So I think that's all great stuff that we'll get into today. But just a little rundown, kind of run a show. We're going to talk a little bit about what's new, and we have a launch even yesterday. Today, we're announcing some new features. So more than just Agent 3, I'll talk about what's new as of like yesterday. Raymar is going to share his amazing applications, workflows, how he got introduced to Replit and all of those different things. And then we'll wrap up with some tips and tricks, maybe just like some discussion, how you can make the most of Replit. I can see already we have some chat questions coming in here. So maybe take some note of those and we'll circle back there. But just to get started, let's talk a little bit about what's new, both in Agent 3 and then recently. So Agent 3 headline features, there's a longer runtime. Agent can now test itself, we're calling it self-testing, and then agent generation. So agent is building agents. We're going to talk about all three of these things and what that means more tangibly. So longer runtimes. Agent can now run for like 3 hours. I have 200 minutes listed here, but we've heard 6 hours, 12 hours, which is like really long. Why do you want that? Well, think about it more as a kind of hands-off building process. Maybe you have a complicated idea. I used to tell people, hey, just like make it as simple as possible. Now you can make things a bit more complex and say, hey, agent, go build this thing out, toggle on max autonomy, and just like let it run. So when we're seeing that reflected in the types of apps people are building. Self-testing, what I mentioned earlier. When you turn on self-testing, which can be done through agent settings, you're going to see agent debug your apps with its own browser. So in the background, what it's doing is like firing up Chrome and then just like clicking around, testing stuff. Basically exactly what I would do when I'm building an app, right? Like, hey, help me implement this feature. And then when I'm done with that, I go and I like click around to see what works, what's broken, what could be improved. Now agent's just going to do that for you. And so take these two things together, right? Longer runtime self-testing. What does that mean? We're just removing the manual process of Q&A, quality assurance, of making sure that stuff works so that agent can do that for you. And you can spend more time thinking and planning and being creative, because that's ultimately the goal, is to be creative, right? And then finally, agents and automations, and that is agent is building agents. What is an agent? An agent is just AI that does stuff for you. So you could say, hey, create an agent that emails me a list of things to do in San Francisco every Thursday. And actually, for the original demo on launch, Raymar is going to talk about his Luma API integrations and some of the things he's built on top of an events API. I use the exact same API to just like find events and like get access to some things, and then create an agent or an automation that can send me a list of things to do. So I want to take that and tie it into some tools to succeed, which we've recently launched. So that's what's new, and here's how you can like kind of more tangibly apply that with some newer tools as well. As of yesterday, we just launched connectors out of beta, and you can connect your favorite accounts and tools in one click. So you go into replit.com/connectors. Once you're logged in, you can connect to your Google accounts, Calendar, Drive, Gmail. You can build apps on top of them. So you connect your Google account, you go into Replit and you say, "Hey, build me an app, that does XYZ with Google Drive, or that gets my Gmail emails and lets me like swipe on them like Tinder or something." And in one click, Agent is going to integrate that into your application. Super amazing experience. I'll have more content out about this soon. Just launched yesterday, so give that a shot. Um, we have themes now. So from the prompt box, you can open up our app themes, and you can customize fonts, colors, typography, you name it. And using themes, you can build more consistent applications, toggle the themes on and off, etc. Really great stuff. And then finally, Agent can now build in any framework. So if you want to build with Next.js, if you want to build with other frameworks that Agent hasn't been able to build with before, you can use Agent in any app or framework. You can do that by importing your project. You can do that by starting with a Replit developer framework or template, or toggling on the general mode from the prompt box. So that's a little bit update of what's new. And now we're going to kick it over to Raymar. He's just going to kind of talk through, I think, his story, and then talk through some other things that he's built using Replit. So I guess maybe to kick things off, how did you get introduced to Replit? What was the first thing you built?
Hmm.
Where have you gone from there?
Okay. So I was introduced to Replit probably in 2019, to be honest. Back in the Webflow days, a guy named David Huang was on the design team, and he was connected to Webflow stuff. And I saw him kind of talking about it. And so I was like, oh, what's this? An IDE, collaborative. And I was like trying to get a little more technical. And so that was kind of my introduction, but I wasn't a coder. And so I was kind of scared of it. I think if you look back at my profile, you can see I started like the 100 Days of Code or whatever, the original like program in Replit. And then I kind of just put it away, and I was like, all right, maybe another day I'll be back for this. And then Agent was announced probably about a year ago. And I was like, oh, what's this Replit thing again? And so I started tinkering, and I can't really remember what the first thing I created. I think the Luma thing was one of the early things that I created with the actual agent. And then I just started building all sorts of random stuff. I built like a trivia app. I found like this open trivia app, and I built it for a friend to show them what it could do. I started playing with like some TL draw stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I just started tinkering with all these things. And as the agent keeps getting better, like I feel like I'm getting exponentially better, and my technical skills are like growing exponentially alongside of it. So it's been like really a good coach too. It's not just like a tool that I'm building with. It's like really leveling me up. And I'm able to have conversations with technical teams that I just was never able to have. And I'm happy to share, some stories about that too. One of my
I think that's I
Yeah,
think, sorry, not to interrupt, but I think that's a really good point. And a lot of people will come and say like, "Well, how do I learn this thing? How do I get better at coding or really whatever?" Especially in the age of AI, you just start building, right? And it's like
Yeah.
that curiosity. I find the best learning comes through just being curious and saying, "Oh, hey, I want to see if I can get this thing to work." Then you go and you just kind of like figure it out and you fail a bunch, and it's just like that's how it works. And people can be afraid of failure, right? And so they want a very like structured way of doing things, but
Yeah.
I tell people to the contrary, just like be really curious and try to figure stuff out. It sounds like that's kind of the path you've followed. And then before I forget, got to shout out DH David Hong, former Replit, big Replit guy, led design, led marketing. Now he's at Atlassian, so got to give him a shout out on the live stream. Yeah, no, all good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing is like all of this is new. And so just tinkering with it, like there's no experts at this stuff except for the people that are on the front lines doing the thing with these tools. And so like anybody who tells you like there's no academic that, is like writing papers about Vibe code, the people who are using Vibe code are just out there like coding, and building things. And so I actually made a comparison to blogging very recently. In the early days of blogging, people dismissed bloggers as like not serious and kind of inconsequential. And then like we look now at the blogging ecosphere, and it's like they're just journalists now. Like most media is independent journalists. And I think Vibe code is in that kind of early phase where lots of it's being dismissed as very trivial and low level. But over the next couple of years, like people are going to build real businesses and real architecture on this stuff. And in the next 5 years, you'll see things that look like really established players, whether that's software development firms or big software startups that kind of had their roots in these early days. And we'll see that kind of progress. And, in a few years, I doubt people will be dismissing this stuff as trivial in any way.
Totally agreed. And I mean, like, what we're seeing already is like the big players. Like, you can look up. I saw some posts recently about how like Fang, Facebook, Apple, Nvidia, Google, all these engineers are using these tools in their job, and it looks very different from just like playing around, right? It is professional software engineering, but these like vibe coding tools are being integrated into proper developer workflows. And what it enables for like the consumer, the average person, is that you can validate ideas, you can build things out and prove that they work. You can learn about software engineering concepts. And then maybe if you want to go hire a contractor, if you want to like scale something out, you can do that. And I agree with everything you're saying, which is that if you think about how good these things have gotten in the last like year or two, where will it be in the next year or three, right? And I think we're going to get to the point where you're going to be able to build more complex things, more production level things. You can do that kind of already using some of these tools, but it's only up from here, I think.
Yeah, and that's where I think the real superpower comes in. I see a lot of people trying these tools and they get discouraged quickly because maybe they don't get the exact outcome they want. But it's like the first technical thing they've ever done, and they think it's just going to be like a magic box that just gives you the thing. And it's like it doesn't do that. We're still kind of at the phase where the more technical you are and the better you can articulate what you want from the machine, the better the machine's going to like give you a response. And so I think like learning how to speak computer, like we're mostly English speakers or like native language speakers, how we communicate. So like learning a little more technical and a little more specificity when you like get into prompting is like super important. So yeah, we can dive in wherever you want on any of that.
Fully agreed. I think yeah, I think that's a point people overlook, right? They see this thing and they think, oh, it's just like some magic, black box that's going to make me $1 million or whatever. I don't know, but it's really all about being, I would say, kind of pedantic to some degree, in that you have to be extremely specific. You have to understand how things work. You have to like have the sort of curiosity to like completely tinker and take things apart, and then the courage to just like fail a bunch. These are all like just things that are inherent to software engineering as well, right? If you talk to anyone who's a self-taught software engineer, I would argue any software engineer really, what they'll tell you is that they built a lot of personal projects and they failed a bunch and they felt like an idiot for a while and then they figured it out and now they got really good at this thing. And
Yeah.
that is the process of getting good at anything, right? There in life, there really is no kind of like golden path where you just like get drop in and you're the best in the world, like whatever. Maybe for a very small portion of people, but even in those cases, I find it's mostly because there is an inherent motivation to learn how the tool works and an inherent motivation to get good at building stuff. So
Yeah.
totally agree there. But yeah, maybe we could start with once you got past that phase, right? You mentioned tinkering, building all these projects. Was there like a bigger project that you built out that you found Replit really useful for?
Yeah, the first thing that really kind of became useful for me was we've been growing a local tech community for the last couple years. Actually, we just started a third year of meetups here locally, and it's kind of becoming like a large, fairly large community. We're getting hundreds of people to show up at our monthly meetups in a small town of like 50,000 people in our city. Um, and so like as the community started growing and we're using Luma, we wanted to like figure out how do you turn this into like something else, or how do we use this data that's in Luma to like let people kind of connect. And so we wanted to build a directory. And up until then, I just had this Webflow site, which was kind of like hodgepodge together using their CMS and a couple integrations. That was like a very basic directory. But every time like I had to update something, like I had to update it. If somebody wanted to change their logo or change anything in the site, like they had to send me a request or fill out a form, or and then I had to go in and manually update that. And then I was like, this is just not going to scale. And so I started thinking like, how do we and then also we had two different sources of truth. Like people would subscribe on the website and that wouldn't send to Luma. So now our Luma events calendar and like my mailing directory were always out of sync. And so somebody would be on the mailing list, but not in Luma, and they would get an invite to the event, but not the newsletter. And it's like, and so like I just started thinking, how do we fix this? And so that was in the early Replit days. And I was just like, what if I feed the documentation to Replit, the Luma documentation to Replit, and I just ask it, hey, can we just sync this data? I just want to pull this data into a database. Let's sync our attendee data, and I want you to run that once a day so that we sync our newsletter, to the Luma data. And then whenever anybody subscribes to the newsletter, I want you to send them to Luma and send them an invite to our next event, And so that's where this kind of started. And then when I got that sync, first of all, I made this tweet and I was like, holy shit, look at this. And then I started like building, and that's probably like 6 months ago now. And now we have 400 something people like with claimed accounts on the site. They can go and see their events. They can RSVP to events. There's members only content on the site now. We use an admin area on the back end now. Like, so there, another thing that was happening before is that like I had the keys to the castle for this membership site that was in Webflow. And so like none of the other like co-organizers ever knew what was going on. They didn't see who was signing up or what was happening on the back end. They couldn't like make updates either. So now there's like this admin portal where they can see people signing up, how many people are converting, what like our membership revenue outside of sponsorships, because sponsorships are kind of handled separately. And now I'm tinkering with like, okay, how do I start like getting people to convert over to paid memberships more? How can I like build? And I'm automating this all in Replit. So instead of me kind of doing this manual process with Make or Zapier or something like that, I'm going in and having Replit build me a button in the admin dashboard that says, hey, invite everybody who doesn't have a membership to like upgrade, or send them like a link to log in and set their credentials in. So it's just become like a really valuable tool for us to manage a community on the back of it. And now I'm trying to figure out like, how do you get that to scale? Like, how do you let the community kind of use this platform or use this thing that we're building, which is this big network, to kind of promote themselves and share content? And people keep asking us, hey, can you promote this event, or can you share this with your membership? And we're like, maybe, but I don't want to deal with that. Like, so I'm starting to build tools like, hey, go over here, use these tools. And like, that's kind of the premise of the things that I'll show you here, the stuff that we'll dive in if we get into that, some demo stuff.
Outstanding. I mean, could you show us the site? Like, this sounds really cool.
Yeah, let me share screen here.
And while you're doing that, I guess, right, we could talk about like why this is cool, right? And I think the crux of what you're describing is you had something that you were really interested in. It actually just started out with solving a problem, right? You mentioned, hey, I have this painful workflow, I want to automate this thing. And then from there, it actually kind of blossomed into an entire ecosystem, an entire application, and you realize that there were advantages to this over some of the other alternatives. So yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. I would love to see this more. If you could zoom in just a little bit more for our viewers on mobile. Awesome.
Yeah, so basically what I have is like a bulletin board as a front page for the site here. We've got a community news feed that just, allows us to share, posts with the group. If you're an admin and you logged in, you can easily create a new post on the front end here, and you can pick, hey, is this for members? Do you want to pin this? Is there a call to action you want to share? I've got Unsplash baked in here. So if you don't have an image that you want, this is, again, another integration. You can just pull something that's interesting from Unsplash, or you could upload from your computer. And soon we're going to like open this up for different permission levels. I'll share some of the admin stuff in the back end, but this is the list that comes from Luma. And so if we go into a profile here, you'll see that I have like a company profile that I can list, and these company profiles can have multiple team members. So there's individuals and there's companies now. And these are just little listings that folks can manage. It's got a little map. If I go into the back end here and I click on my company profile, just a real simple form to fill all that out. Again, upload images and add tags. And yeah, so like now we've got, you got an obligatory dark mode, obviously. Cool directory. So I can search in here, and let's say I want like software dev, I can see who's doing software development, and again, see these companies and their profiles. And it's got badges. So we assign badges based on, like how many events they've been to. Are they new? Are they on the board? Have they volunteered? That type of stuff. Then we show the events they've been at. So, and then here's like this showing that I'm going to the next event. So if I click on that, a little sidebar that again shows me who's going to the event details. If I want, I can add it to the calendar. And this is all built in Replit. Like obviously this is pulling the Luma data in, but most of this backend stuff is actually living in Luma here. And then here's, the dashboard. Hopefully I'm not going to dox all my people, but yeah. So, we're starting to collect. I won't go to the internal pages. We'll start showing emails, but yeah, again, we can like open this up and edit post. Really nice, easy to edit and update stuff. And yeah, it's become like a really valuable resource for the community.
Outstanding. This is amazing. So I have a couple questions for you. First one, how did you think about building this? Right, you mentioned, hey, this is actually really powered by an API. When you're approaching like building on top of an API, how do you like think about services that Luma is going to provide, what you're going to track? How did you think about that?
You know, it's funny. I didn't really think a lot about it. The first thing I did was this sidebar here. So imagine like nothing on the right exists. This like bulletin board doesn't exist. It was just, can I get these people in here? And this image and this name and this comes from Luma. And so when I was able to, I was just like, can I get folks into a system? You know, and I figured if I could get them there, then like I knew Replit would help me do some of the other stuff. And so I was just, it was just that one thing. Like, and I tried a bunch of times. Actually, if we go into my like Replit dashboard, let's do this. If we go into Replit here and I go into my apps and I scroll all the way like to the bottom, like check this out. Luma, 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 Luma,
Yeah.
Luma, 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 right? Until I finally got like, okay, one of these is gonna work. You know, and so like, and even after I got like a core piece of it working, I went back and tried different ways again, and I was like, no, I kind of like this way. And so to get that one piece that actually worked and did what I needed it to do was like I don't know, 10 or 15 tries at it. So yeah, I don't know. And I don't have a lot of like technical knowledge of how to understand, you know, even what an API is. I looked at the docs and I was like, oh, they have people records. I see some examples for a curl request that can pull this over. I copied and pasted a lot of stuff and threw it into the agent. And I just said, hey, like what can this thing do? Can, you know, and then I just asked the agent, like, what else could we do with this? You know, that's often a thing I'll do is like, hey, what do you suggest if you were going to build like a cool app, you know? And so that type of stuff also helps.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, so a lot of really great stuff here. First, you're experimenting, which is amazing, outstanding. I think everybody should experiment. Sometimes it breaks. You're like, okay, cool, whatever. I'll try again. I'll try something different. That's necessary. That's how we learn. And then an API, right? Like, hey, I don't know what some APIs do. And sometimes I'll go to the docs and it's like kind of ambiguous or like, I'm like, this doesn't really make sense. But now you can ask AI, you can throw in an agent and say, hey, is this what I need to build this thing? Can this
Mhm.
help me do what I think it could do? Agent can read that web page. So just like assume you have somebody who knows what they're talking about sitting
Yep.
next to you that can advise you on some of this stuff, right? And so it sounds like I love the process you did detailed here, which is like, oh, can I just get this sidebar to work, right? Can I get the API to connect properly, right? So you talked about just pulling in people. And then from there, it kind of blossomed into this very organic project that is now a business and you're selling memberships and you're just like helping people, which is outstanding.
Yeah.
And so I saw some people ask, hey, can you deploy production apps on Replit? Can you build out stuff? This is an example of basically building a business that started with serving. It started with, hey, there's this annoying thing that I have to do and I don't want to do it in Make or Notion. I'm going to use Replit. Can I? And then, hey, like Replit's pretty cool. Can I start doing more stuff in Replit? Now you have an amazing project, and that's just like consistency, dedication, curiosity building,
Yeah.
and learning what the tool does. So that's really outstanding.
Yeah, and that's kind of led to like the next thing, which like if we look down here, there's like this little welcome bug, and this became kind of a piece of the next exploration. Is I have all of these like websites. I've been building stuff on the internet forever. If we go to like Webflow and we go to Raymmar, I have like a ton of clonables here and resources that I've like built for the Webflow community over the years. And some of them have like thousands of clones, right? Like instances where people have like copied them. They're like almost like a remix in Replit. They call them clonables in Webflow. And I had no kind of visibility on what was going on with these things. And I was like, I wonder if I could build a little kind of widget that allows me to embed some kind of instruction, some kind of interactive thing. So for here, you know, like, hey, you want to send us a message, or here's a call to action to become a member, or one-on-one support, like some kind of little, you know, interactive thing. And I'm still playing with functionality here, but also across all these other sites now. Like if I go to No Code Video, which is this like YouTube clone I built years ago, you see this powered by Atmos tag. And so now all these sites that I don't have Google Analytics set up on, I don't have any real analytics on the back end. I've built a whole marketing and analytics suite that allows me to like basically display a unified call to action across all of these websites. And those are managed like on the back end of this little platform that I'm building. And so now I'm kind of experimenting with like, how do you kind of connect all of these decentralized properties, right? Like, so here's all these different websites and we'll see when it loads, like, maybe it's not gonna on this one. Oh, you know what? I didn't update it because I changed the URL to the website. Yeah.
I know how that goes.
have a couple. Sorry to interrupt. I have a couple of questions coming in from the chat here. One is from kick off it easy here with Ice Cream Paints. So very impressed with the website. Do you think you're gonna have to hire an engineer to maintain the app in case it breaks moving forward?
I don't think so. With the type of functionality that this thing is, like, it's fairly basic CRUD stuff. There's not like a lot of real technical stuff here. I do worry about that on this other thing that we'll probably show that's a little bit more complicated. Like this thing here that I'll demo is a little bit more complicated. One thing I have been doing that's probably a good takeaway for folks is that I have been meeting and talking with somebody who is a very technical. Shout out to Lou, who's been hanging out with us in our Build Hour crew. If you're out in the Build Hour crew, what's up? But we've been doing these like weekly hangouts. Essentially, I was meeting with a dev, looking at the vibe code stuff, because I was like doing all this stuff and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably going to break some things. I should probably have some technical folks around me that I can kind of interact with. And so I started meeting with this guy Lou once a week to look at the stuff I was building and to dive into the code and to kind of troubleshoot or think about like, hey, how would I approach this next feature as this thing's getting complicated? And that's been super helpful. And he also helped me learn how to dive into the code a little bit and how to troubleshoot things in ways that I didn't really understand. And so do I think I'll need to hire devs at some point? For sure, because I'm building more and more complicated stuff. But also, if you could find folks that are technical to like troubleshoot or bounce ideas off of, or to think through things, that also becomes really helpful. That's been an invaluable thing for me, learning this stuff.
That's really great stuff. Just first CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete, I believe. And so when we talk about that, it's like there are entities maybe in a database, right? And you can do things with those. And so a CRUD app is just like a simple application that maybe creates objects in a database. Maybe if you're like have tasks, you create a task, you can update a task, you can read a task or delete a task, right? And so those apps, AI is getting really good at building. So if you're building something and you can map sort of the technology to the functionality, and you can say this type of app fits into this bucket, it gives you maybe a better map of what's possible with AI, and then those are really good ones. And then second, I love what you're doing with learning, right? Which is like you're seeking out other people, seeking out people who are experienced, and then learning from them. And you can also, chat with AI, go on the web, but ultimately talking to people can be really useful.
Yeah, and then opening that up, like we started doing these, like he and I were just kind of meeting, and we're like, what if we just invited people into these chats? And that's kind of turning into its own little thing too. That if folks want to, like starting little groups like that, where you're kind of collaboratively building things and cross-checking, and like, hey, what are you building? Oh, I'm building this. What did you run into? Like those are very useful in these early days. Even just to check your sanity sometimes, because you can definitely test your patience working with AI.
For sure. And sorry, Francisco, did you have a question?
Yeah, kind of you're talking about the iteration process, right? And kind of building new features and building new things. And this is really a question for both Matt and Raymar, from Spanky McDoob, and also being first is like, how can we optimize for the most efficient prompts when it comes to kind of like actually trying to build something new? And the second question is like, would you load up a set of requirements for an app and walk away for a couple of hours, or maybe is it better to kind of implement smaller features at a time as you're building?
For sure, the first thing or the second thing, the latter. You wanted like bite-sized chunks. Even though the new agent is way better at like giving it kind of the scope you want and letting it run. I've been doing things like queuing up things to go to bed, so that when I wake up, like there's new progress in each of the projects to go check. Or if I'm like going to go run an errand, I will queue up a nice task, and still you got to define it nicely. But I found that like if you can focus the AI on very specific things, it's easier than if you try to one-shot it. If I would have tried to build this full directory at first and said, hey, build me a Luma app that has a full member profiles and companies linked to this, and the ability to post public things and private content and blah blah blah, like it probably would have just been like, I don't know what to do here. And so since I was able to get that first rudimentary sync happening, then I was like, oh, now we need profiles. Oh, now we should have businesses. Oh, now we should be able to post. And so like each of those kind of became a step on this house. And that, is probably the right way to approach these things, which again is very much like a developer or like a traditional technical process would work.
Totally. I mean, and yeah, you make, again, more great points. With Agent 3, you have autonomy levels. So if you go in your agent settings, you can like change how autonomous or how independent agent is. And so if I'm like really engaged, right? Say I'm like, I have Replit open, I have an hour, I want to see if I can build something. I'm going to turn on the low autonomy level because I can kind of like, there's more discovery there. It's more of my input and less of agent's input. Now, if you're going to bed, right, or if you're thinking, hey, I actually just want to see if this thing's possible, right? Could I get a V1 up and running? Well, maybe you just toggle on max autonomy or high autonomy, and you kick off an agent run. And so I think it
Yeah.
really depends on how engaged you are, and then another thing to think about is like the feedback loop, right? Like as a developer, if you've ever heard the term like developer experience, a feedback loop is how quickly you can iterate. And so, how fast do I see changes in response to my inputs? And if you want a really tight feedback loop, as in you're sitting down at your laptop, low autonomy. If you want a really like kind of lax feedback loop, which is useful if you just kind of like want agent to do something and you're like going to run errands and you want it to test itself, high autonomy or max autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's probably like the right way too. It's if you're getting nitty gritty and you're kind of doing tighter edits, then you probably want less autonomy. And if you're building like a bigger feature and you know are doing bigger kind of scope things, then you want a little bit more autonomy because you want it to kind of think about all the other dependencies that are related to that. Whereas like when you want lower autonomy, it's like I only want this thing to change here that I'm looking at. And so learning that is also a little bit of I think the learning curve when it comes to these tools too is like how much freedom to give the agent and then kind of how to work back and forth with it as you build things.
And there is a learning curve, right? And that's to be expected.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Francisco?
Just in general on prompts, like what what is an efficient prompt? What is a good way to kind of like send those things out? And then also another question for Spanky McDoob is when should I use Assistant as well?
Mm. I find myself not using Assistant very much at all anymore with the new agent because it's focused and it has more context. I find sometimes the Assistant lacks the context, and this might be because I'm working with a little bit more complicated apps. And then for the prompts, you just got to like think through that before you like. I've seen some people and they're just like, I want to add the ability to post to this site. It's like what like that could go anywhere. But if you say like, I want the ability for a new user to add posts and the post should contain X, Y, and Z field, and it should have a rich text and the ability to upload an image, and the button to add post should be here. And like you give it like some parameters, then you're going to get like a real like a way better response. And now with the plan mode, I'll also ask it to like think through what I'm doing. So I almost never just go in and just start prompting the agent. Like I'm going to ask it like, hey, I would like to do this X, Y, and Z with this application. I know we have this functionality and this functionality. How can we move forward best to accomplish X, Y, or Z, right? Or accomplish this goal. And then have the agent kind of assess based on the code, oh, you can do it like this. And then I'll come up with a prompt based on that. And sometimes I'll even dump that conversation, start fresh with context as the prompt in build mode and just send it. Sometimes I'll switch over right there and build. But if that plan process has kind of gone back and forth and there's other things that I brought up and then I finalize on something else, I kind of don't want any of that context in the chat. So, and again, you gotta just, the only way to do it is again, like doing it. You gotta like try a couple times, maybe not get the result you want, and then go back and try it again and, use the checkpoints to kind of backtrack a little bit.
Love it. Yeah, on my side, I find myself using Assistant a lot less as well, and just defaulting to low autonomy mode on Agent. It's kind of a little bit is the better outcome. And for prompting, context engineering, like I get this question all the time. I think there are a couple things at play. You have to think about the prompt, but then also the context, which is the information you're giving to agent. So if you can think through the problem a little bit, if you can prompt AI to like understand the problem space, it's like you're explaining something to a colleague or a coworker, right? I'm sure, well, hopefully most people watching have been employed before. But if you're describing something to a coworker and you're like, hey, like I'm going on vacation for a week, this is the process that I do for this thing, and this is how we need to build it out, right? And you just, maybe if you write one sentence, how likely is it that they're actually going to do what you're suggesting, right? Pretty unlikely. Now, there are some motivated people out there, but the point we're making here is that agents don't have that motivation, autonomy, independence. Our agents getting better, but often the more descriptive you can be, the more concise you can be, the more I would say, descriptive, not prescriptive. When I say that, I mean explaining kind of what you want, but not exactly how to go about doing it. But hey, like we want to integrate the Luma API with this application. I know that we need this building block, and I know that we want to like kind of bridge the gap between these two things. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it, but this is the outcome that we want. It's the same thing as if you're instructing a colleague or a coworker, right? And so that's how I think about writing prompts. It also just kind of like varies, right? Because like sometimes my app will break I'll like look at the console and I'll be like, oh, there's like an error here. That obviously something broke. And I know agent can see that. So I'll just be like, please fix the error. And like, if I have a relatively, just because I've used the product a lot and I have a pretty strong feeling that agent's going to look at that error and be like, oh yeah, I forgot something in the API and fix it. You can kind of like keep it higher level, but yeah, I think a lot about the structure of the prompt and then the context, which is like documentation, examples, files, screenshots, like the information that we can give to agent to help accomplish that goal.
Even like one of my hacks in Replit is using TL Draw or some kind of canvas tool for visual UI, right? Like don't just like a lot of people just ask the agent for a component and then they're like, oh, the design sucks. Well, like give the agent some guidance, so I don't really design, like I'm not in Figma fully designing the components that I want, but I will draw little wireframes or very simple wireframes in TL Draw. I'll also type, what I want and how I want that to look. And I'll screenshot that with instructions and feed that into the agent with context. And that's been one of the most useful tools for actually getting what I want from a UI standpoint. I've been sharing this audience zone / radio platform that I've been building, and people are like, oh, it's nice design. How did you get that? I was like, well, it's mostly from, like I would say 30% of my credits have been focused on UI and, design refinements and really trying to make this not look like a cookie cutter or copy and paste, AI site, which, I see getting a lot of criticism online these days.
Very cool. I mean, I guess speaking of that, like, do you have any other, like, do you want to show us that project? Do you have other projects you want to walk through?
I would love to show how that Sarasota tech directory evolved into basically this next thing that I'm building. Is my screen still sharing?
I think we got, it looks like an infinity mirror situation. No, we're all good. So
yep. Yeah. So, okay. So that Sarasota Tech directory is like the front page. This is something that's on like our URL. We own this, and this is like a thing that I think, is super useful for the community. But it's still not like something that we could scale out and invite like a bunch of people in a usable way to not just use it for our community, but like for other communities. And so like there's another problem that we're solving as this community grows. Again, we've built this big platform. There's 1,600 active members in our community, and we kind of become the bottleneck for communications or distributions or content or things that are coming up. And so like I've been obsessed with curating and kind of organizing the internet for a long time. I'm a big fan of things like My Mind and Sublime and Glasp. There's like these tools that are like robust bookmarking tools that allow you to add context to the internet. And then I'm also like very active in lots of community stuff, but that all happens in like Slack or Discord or Telegrams or whatever, like WhatsApp. And like lots of knowledge gets lost in these communities. And part of, like my mission in the world is to like help people connect, but also to use technology to connect communities. And so like I'm now building a tool that basically, again, builds on this billboard concept, this Linktree style surrogate. So if I, kind of close this, let me close this here. The idea is this would be like a Linktree style site that you could have for, a network or a community or something like that. And inside of here, there's a bunch of tools for publishing, curating, and grabbing content from across the web. So if I go to the homepage, I'll see that this chat here, my buddy Daniel, what's up? Shout out Daniel in the audience right now, shared this YouTube video that is live. And we can see there's a couple discussions happening about this. And if I click in, let's see, one of these has a chat. Yeah. So Daniel's watching live, and I can say, hey, Daniel.
Shout out Daniel.
Yeah, what's up, Daniel? And so like he's watching live, and so this lives here on the app. But like, what if I wanted to take this context onto the internet? And so let me actually go out to the YouTube channel right here, and like the YouTube chat is cool. But imagine if this is like an Apple event and there's millions of people in here. How do you keep up with the chat? So what if you could like open up your own private community chat, right? So here's the same feed that I just had in the app that I just showed, but it's in a browser extension. And if I click into this and open the chat, it'll actually like show me those same discussions that we're having. And yeah, live.
Very cool.
Live from, come on now, from the extension. And so we have this like, what's that?
It's always hard. I say typing live is always a challenge.
Yeah, and so here you have like basically a Slack thread that lives over top of this. I have my community feed if I want it. Everything's kind of organized by chats. So if I dive in, it's going to open up another video here that I was looking at. Again, live chat in context. And so it kind of becomes this like social context layer that lives over top of the internet. but also allows folks to organize these bulletin boards on the back end and kind of connect, right? So again, I'm building all these different brands, and I often don't want to stand up like a website for it. I don't want to stand up analytics. And so on the back end of this, I have these cool little networks now that give me a couple things. One, I can post to the network and I can kind of share content and organize content about that topic, and it's all categorized by tags, etc. Two, it gives me a one-click subscribe, and this is connected to my ConvertKit and some of my other email workflows. And I'm now also building the ability to just natively send blasts inside of the system. So this content that I organize, actually, let me go to one I just sent recently. As we organize this content, as we clip things, as we pull things into the bulletin board, I can give folks access to this network and give them different permissions for what they can do inside of here. And part of that is like setting up these blasts. And so as I curate this content, oh, you know what? Let me not do that. That's going to share emails. Let me open up this new blast. And so basically what I can do is like create an email. This is an email, and eventually this will be automated. So this will auto create the email, but this will let me just pull in anything that I've curated. Let's say I want to show everything that's been curated in the last 24 hours, and that's not been maybe sent in a blast already. And so cool, I can add these, and now I've basically got a newsletter. And so I'm working up to a system where we can automate as we curate like all this stuff into this network. How do you let people pick what tags do you want to hear from us? How often do you want to hear from us? Do you want a daily update? Do you want a weekly update? Do you want a monthly update? Do you only want updates about AI, that are in this category? And that way the audience can kind of control how much they want to receive from us. And we can then create a platform where a bunch of people can kind of submit stuff into here, and then we can kind of curate. And if I log out, this is something cool I'll show you here. If I log, actually, let me do this in a new incognito. We have it set up so you can collect public submissions. So you don't have to be logged in now to send us stuff. So anybody from our community, like if I go to the Sarasota Tech site, same thing. Anybody from the community or from the public can submit something here. And when I go to the logged in site, if we see in the Sarasota Tech Network, if I go to manage this one, what I'll see is I have a submission here, and I can then see a public submission. I can approve it. I can reject it. I can decide to collect public submissions. And so there's lots of tools here that allow me to, and then I can see analytics across the network. And I showed you that little widget. So I don't want to get too convoluted, but that little guy on the bottom down here is also connected to this audience owned platform. So it's like this closed loop. It's like, here's my platform, here's the stuff I'm curating, and then here's this external property that we own. How do you let people kind of curate, build this social media type experience, and then have that content sent into some property that the brand owns, something that's like a real piece of like digital real estate for the community, for the brand, et cetera. And so that's what I'm tinkering with, is like, how do you build this digital marketing ecosystem that allows me to curate content, kind of keep people up to date on stuff that they're interested in? And then how do we leverage that into like a public facing media hub that's useful for us as a community?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think the great part about this is just understanding how you're thinking about building, and then how you're thinking about these different services, and then how you're going about tying them all together using a tool like Replit.
Yeah, that's been the crazy thing to me, to be honest. And this again started very simple. It started with these little widgets. Can I embed this on a website? And then I was like, oh, can I send other data into these widgets? Like there's a whole like auction-based little ad system. So like, could we as a community, let's say you have 1,000 contributors to your community, could you have them all have this little widget on their site? And now we build a distributed display network where like when Raymmar wants to launch his product, we all shout Raymmar out on this little bug, or like when it's time to launch a new feature for the product, we're all kind of like unified in displaying this thing. And now we start turning these web properties that we own, like right now the social algorithms kind of steal all the value from a network. And so it's like, why shouldn't we own the networks? Like, why shouldn't we build these networks? We're all building things online. So it's like, how do you use these tools for good? Like all the tech tools are kind of like extracting value from the world. And so it's like, how can you use the tech now to capture some of the value down at the network level? And that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And again, going back to like just building really complex stuff in Replit, it's just blown my mind that, the live chat stuff, the embedded something on like on a website, a widget, I can just install a script and now I'm getting analytics. That's through Mixpanel, right? So it's like robust analytics. It's not like chintzy little stuff. Like, and then I can customize anything else I want to add to this because Mixpanel has a robust backend. SendGrid is connected in here so I can send emails. So like those emails I'm sending, I'm getting open and close or click rates and all like very nuanced data on stuff that like, again, I could do in SendGrid or I can do in ConvertKit, but it's not unified. It's not connected to all my other stuff. And so now it's like tying these things together that I never like, again, and to build something like this would have been 50, 80, $100,000. No problem. So when I talk about I spent a couple $1,000, it's like, it's incomparable to even think about the output I'm getting from a tool like this compared to years of beating my head against, overseas software teams or even really talented software teams. Like that translation process is hard. It's like I'm inventing with code here. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think, there are a couple things there. And the first thing is what I've noticed is that even if you go out to pay somebody to do something, they just very few agencies, I'm not going to say all agencies because there's some amazing people out there, right? But very few people are going to care as much about your product, about the thing you're building as you do, right? And so it's like nobody's going to be up until all hours of the night building something, but you might be because you think it's fun and you think it's interesting, right? And so we're giving you all the tools to do that and to have the agency and to have the interest and to like nerd out. You can't really pay somebody to enough to care about those things, and definitely not on just like a contract one-off basis. And so I think that's the real unlock. And then the flip
That's such a
side is
good
like
point.
well, thank you. And I think it's true, right? Like because I've seen this in other areas of my life, even if you're like, the amazing thing about AI, right, is you can do it yourself, right? The barrier used to be, oh, I don't know how this thing works, or I don't have the time to research this thing, right? Events management. I don't have time to research the Luma API to write code by hand. I don't know how to write code. Well, now you can just do that, right? Whereas you would have had to go pay somebody. And what you might find is that you have a higher attention to detail, or you're more particular, and you can get better outputs.
That's it.
So
100%. The little details of like, so I've paid big money to build pieces of this before with like real developers and then working with other folks and like the exactly what you just said, that attention to detail, the little bit of nuance. It's like maybe you get the feature, but it's like it's not as seamless as it could have been. It's not as smooth as you would expect it to be. There's an extra step in the process that doesn't need to be there that like you obviously know to remove, but the developer who's just following instructions doesn't care. They're like, it works, And so like all those little nuances of again being able to sculpt this thing yourself, it's impossible to quantify what that feels like as a product manager, as somebody who's like been bottlenecked by that technical translation process for essentially his entire career. To be able to unlock that, it's like I don't know how to express that.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the magic of vibe coding. And people, I think there are many interpretations on the internet. You could read stuff about people misinterpreting it as robots are going to take my job. Really, it's just democratizing software engineering, and more than software engineering, just creation. And it's giving power to people to create things that they couldn't create before. Now,
Yeah,
speaking of creation, right? One thing I'm noticing that you do on all of these apps, right, is you find services that can provide like backbone functionality for some of this stuff, and then you start building on top of it, right? So
correct.
you talk about Mixpanel, which, if for folks unfamiliar, Mixpanel provides product analytics, but they also expose an API, application programming interface, right? So if there's an API, it means that you can build something with a computer to get data, to put data, to read data, all of these things from that service. And so what you're doing is you're saying, oh, hey, there's this core service, and now I want to tailor it to my particular use case. And then you go out and you build something on top of that using Replit. That seems like a really powerful
Correct.
pattern, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's so much. So again, I could probably have built pieces of this with Make or Zapier and N8N and some kind of convoluted form does this, triggers that. Okay. But it wouldn't be this integrated, custom, like just give me the metrics I want that matter to me, with the ability to scale and know, like, I don't have to, like, so going back to somebody's question, they said, hey, do you have to like hire developers? I don't have to support the analytics. Like that's just a service that I know is like usable and enterprise grade and could scale as big as I want. Same thing with SendGrid. Like I could send as many emails as I want and I'm never going to stress email servers and I don't have to worry about compliance or deliverability or any of that stuff. And so, yeah, for sure, using like the raw components of these tools and then reassembling them to me is probably what the future of digital invention will look like, is these little microservices that, again, nobody would ever build because it just doesn't make sense to spend like the amount of money we would have had to invest to build something like this for like no real guaranteed return just probably wouldn't happen, but the ability to tinker for a couple bucks, even if it's a couple $1,000, like again, over the course of a few months, not that crazy. Like to talk to a competent developer, you're talking maybe 100, 200, 300 bucks an hour, depending on the stack. So like, yeah, I don't know. Like that's how you have to think about. There's like this fundamental mind shift where it's like we're looking at it as a SaaS because we're familiar with this like deterministic pricing model that most SaaS come with, but we're building like probabilistic stuff. So it's like you have to think about it as this is a human, right? This is a person that you're, person hours, and not that you're replacing them, but like this is what you have to compare it to. It's like the work hours of an actual human and the output of that. And so like when you compare that, it's inconsequential, the cost for these tools, even though it can feel very serious. Like I look at the bill every month and I'm like, oh God, like, are you going to keep doing that? But it's like, if I launch this product or if I start selling these tools, which is the goal, right? The goal is to kind of take this thing to market. Then again, the return could be exponential. And so to me, it's an investment. And it's a no brainer to start playing with this stuff. Yeah. And I think it's going to create so many more technical / developer jobs because again, as I build this stuff, I'm going to need support, right? There's going to be a point where this thing scales beyond or needs work that I can't build. Even if we have to rebuild the whole thing, let's say we get funding and the thing goes crazy, blah, blah, whatever, and you have to rebuild it. Okay. That's a hurdle you cross, but like, we're not playing with Figma prototypes anymore. We're not, playing with interactive images. Like this is a real thing that works, you can play it and touch it. And like, it's just a fundamental shift in how things used to get built.
Yeah. So a couple more, I think, outstanding points there. And then we can kind of move into some maybe like discussion because I know we're coming up on an hour here. So the first thing you said, which I think is great, right? This is not deterministic. What we mean there is like you're going to get different outputs. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does work, even for the same prompt. That's why you just have to try over and over again. And there's like a different pricing model, right? So like we're used to saying, oh, I'm going to pay 20 bucks a month for this thing that just works all the time. But now it's like, hey, you can be on Replit for as long as you want. You can get a lot of really great work, but you have to kind of put something into that. And therefore you have to think about it a little bit more kind of by the hour, like you would think about paying a person. Now, typically agents running at like a $10 an hour rate. So like that's a lot less expensive to your point than a software engineer. The second thing that I love is like we're not replacing people, right? Because all of this stuff you're showing us just wouldn't have happened before, right? So net new, the pie keeps getting bigger. And the pie gets bigger for you because you're able to tinker and build things that were impossible before. Because before you would have had to say, oh, hey, like I want you to build out this thing. It's going to take 100 hours. I'm gonna pay a software developer. That's 30 grand. It's just not happening, right? Like maybe it's not happening, but you can sit down and you can do it yourself to prove a concept. You showed us like, hey, you're starting to monetize your projects. You're starting to make money. Now you go out and you have a budget, you build with agent, but then your time is better spent maybe prototyping your next thing. You hand it off to a software developer or creating jobs, right? So I like to think about AI and technology as growing the pie. There is so much work to be done that nobody's job is like quote unquote getting taken. There are so many things to be done that the goal is to help people and create more things. It sounds like this is a really good example of that, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about like electricity demand, as we found new things to burn and create energy, like we haven't slowed down how much energy we need. If anything, like there's more demand for that type of stuff. And so I think there's an almost unlimited demand for software development talent and like technical people. So yeah, like you're saying, I think this is just going to open up floodgates for more and more people to get technical. What I think it does do though is like if you're coming out of college and you think just because you took some computer science program that you're like going to get a job working in tech, like no, you got to like actually go out and learn. And now you got to like the threshold for what it means, I think, to become competent technically is getting higher and higher because of what you can do with these tools as an individual, I think.
I mean, I agree, but the optimistic side to that is you can learn a lot faster if you're a
Yeah,
student.
correct.
So I always try to tell people that it's like, hey, like if you want to learn TypeScript, like I mean, my story, I'm self-taught. I was a self-taught developer, worked as a data engineer for a little while, but learning Python, I like opened up a Python textbook after work every day for 2 hours and like read this thing, and it was like the most dreadful experience I've ever had in my entire life. And now instead, you could go to Replit, like open up a Python like app and just start being like, hey, just like explain to me how this works. You could build something. I think that you could learn to code at least 10 times faster now.
Yeah.
So if you want to be technical, you can learn faster. If you have agency, you can do more stuff. So to the new grads out there, don't think like, oh no, the world's ending. Look at it as an opportunity. I say the same thing to content creators. It's just an opportunity to
Yeah.
do a lot of really great stuff.
It's an opportunity and you don't need to wait for permission. Like you don't need to wait for someone to give you a job or to make you an offer or to what, like you could just go start building stuff. And that's kind of what I meant, is like a lot of people think, oh, I'm entry level, I just got to go start at the bottom of the rung. It's like, no. Entry level means go build real stuff like today, and so like go learn how to do the stuff. And there's no credentialism here. Like if you put something on the internet and I get to the link and it works and it does what it does, like I don't care what you look like, how much you weigh, like whatever, who you like to have sex, like none of those things matter as long as the tool works. Right. It's like, so like in the physical world, lots of those things matter, right? Like it's all superficial and it's lots of politics and it's lots of this and that. But it's like on the web, this is like, it's a beautiful playing field, because I just go to a URL. If it solves my problem, I'm in, and I might put a credit card in there, and so like if you're out there and you're thinking about this stuff, it's a perfect time to just be like, what could I build? What kind of problem could I solve? Like, and there's no hurdles really other than a computer and a couple bucks, and an internet connection. And so like, I think we're probably at the greatest time ever for creators. Like, I don't think we've seen a better time to be a digital creator in at least my lifetime.
Totally agree with all that. I love the message. And that's like what Replit's about. It's about, because the same mindset you're describing for new grads is the mindset you have to have building on Replit. I'm like, look, my job is to teach everyone how to use Replit. I'm doing my best out here, but like ultimately at the end of the day, you just have to go and like try it out and try to build something. And like, you can probably tell that's what gets me excited about working here, is like seeing people say like, oh, I can, right? Like I can create things.
Yeah.
And that's how you get started.
Well, and the excitement is one of those things that, like, I remember I built a tool that connected to the X API and ingested my bookmarks, and then it like analyzed them, plotted them on a graph, and like gave me this cool like daily digest of things I was bookmarking, or weekly digest of things I was bookmarking. And if it weren't because the X API is so expensive, like I think that would have been a bang up product. Like I just don't. Anyway, but
I saw that. I saw you post that. I loved it. It was a great
the
project.
moment I got that API in and I saw the AI running against all my bookmarks, and I'm like, wow, like I got up and did like this little happy dance, because I was like beating my head against this thing for an hour or two, and finally it works, and I'm like, get the hell out of here! Like I built this, and well, with the agent, but it's for sure there's like a dopamine reward, and it's like kind of replaced my doom scrolling a lot. Like I'm over here with the agent, like, God, can I build this thing now? And so I feel like a mad scientist, honestly, these last few months, trying to just all these ideas that I've had that have been limited by code or by, again, cost, by having to hire somebody. Now I'm like, oh, let me see. And like 90% of the time I can build something close. And if I decide to keep going, then I keep going. If not, it's like, okay, well, you did that. And it's whatever. It's a cool experiment. So yeah, it's just a time to be tinkering if you're out there and you have some high agency and a little bit of creative taste, skill set, etc.
Outstanding. Well, I love it. And we are coming up on the hour here. So I think we talked about a lot of really great stuff. I personally really appreciated you coming on and showing us all the amazing things that you've been building. But yeah, to kind of round it out here, anything else you want to share with the community? Francisco, Raymar, anything?
Go ahead, Raymar.
I was just gonna say, we one of the things we're doing is we're trying to play in this like vibe code / Replit community. Can we build like a curation engine that like keeps people that are not in this space up to date with things that are happening in either this or other categories? So again, I'm like testing with a few communities, but if you're out there building community, or if you're like interested in getting involved with one of these projects, we'd love to have folks that want to like tinker with us or like play around and build. We're having these builder hangouts once a week. So yeah, if anybody's out there tinkering and you're like looking for folks to kind of hang out with and troubleshoot or learn from, we'd love to have you. Yeah, you can check out the ray.do URL and request access there. And yeah, it's kind of fun. This is just going to keep experimenting. Like I have very high hopes for the output on some of this stuff. So yeah.
Outstanding.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, just thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Answer a couple different questions. Yeah, this will be recorded, so it'll be on YouTube probably by the end of the week. And then moving forward, every session we'll also be recorded. We are aiming right now, we're still planning our session for next week, and we're going to try to keep it fairly consistent on a bi-weekly basis, if not weekly. So keep an eye out for that. And huge shout out to Raymar and his community. They have this incredible build hour that takes place every Tuesday. I try to join every week, and it's just been very inspiring to see how people are building, but also it's like a very great way to see live, like, builds happening, get your questions answered. And of course, we have our own discourse channel as well. So if you're looking to join, you can apply there, and I'll go ahead and approve it. And then one last thing, I just want to send out a huge shout out to Ice Cream Paints, Eric, Edward, Spanky McDoug, Joe, Abid, Ben, and Antonio, just for being in the chat with us and just like answering a bunch of questions as we go along. It's great to see everybody here, and I can't wait to see you again soon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been great. There's this real energy kind of building around this community generally, and I think that's like pent up uh the same creator demand that I have, which is like we've been limited. There's been this like technical ceiling above a lot of our heads for a long time, and now that glass ceiling is like slowly breaking. And I think there's a lot of excitement around folks that are just like, let's do this thing. So whether it's our community or somewhere else in the Replit space or vibe code world, like you should for sure plug in. And it's a great way to launch your career or start building like business relationships and just really connecting with other builders. And you never know, maybe you'll meet your co-founder or find like a cool marketing channel. So I can't speak highly enough of the value of getting together with other folks to build these types of things. So that'll be my last takeaway.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, I think with that, we can wrap this one up. But like I said, thanks again, Raymar. Thanks again,
Yeah, of course.
Francisco. And until next time, we'll catch y'all later. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.